The iron collar lay in 3 pieces on the Charleston courthouse steps, filed through during the night of September 7th, 1859. Blood still marked the interior edges where metal had pressed flesh for 6 years. Beside it, pinned by a river stone, was a scrap of broadsheet listing 7 names beneath a single word: paid. By dawn, 3 of those men would be found dead in their homes, arranged with surgical precision to look like natural causes. 2 more would vanish entirely, their empty beds still warm. The remaining pair would flee Charleston by noon, abandoning businesses and families to escape whatever was methodically erasing them from the city. The constabulary initially blamed abolitionists or slave revolt. They were half right. The hunter moving through Charleston's elite households wasn't driven by ideology. He was collecting debts written in scars, sold children, and a wife's name he whispered each night before sleep. Samuel had been property for 32 years. Now he was something worse. Charleston in 1859 smelled of salt marsh, raw cotton, and the particular rot that comes from heat working on prosperity built from suffering. The city's wharves stretched like fingers into the harbor, drawing ships from Liverpool, Boston, Havana. Fortunes rose and fell on manifests that listed human beings, alongside barrels of rice and bales of cotton. Samuel first learned to count by watching bodies move through the auction house on Chalmers Street. He was 8 years old, standing beside his mother in the crowd of people waiting to be sold. A white-haired auctioneer called numbers and received bids. Samuel counted the pattern. Higher numbers for younger men, lower for women with children, lowest for the old. His mother taught him to subtract, too. The difference between what a family was worth together and what they brought separately. "Remember the numbers," she whispered the night before she was sold away from him. "Numbers tell truth when words lie." He was purchased by Marcus Treadwell, a shipping merchant who needed dock labor and household staff. Treadwell owned 43 people across 3 properties. He considered himself a moderate master, church-attending, reasonably humane. He fed his workers adequately, allowed family arrangements, rarely sold children under 10. By the standards of Charleston's planter class, this qualified as Christian mercy. Samuel worked Treadwell's warehouse for 12 years, loading cargo, checking manifests, learning the mathematics of commerce. He taught himself to read by studying shipping ledgers when supervisors weren't watching. Numbers came easier than letters at first, but he mastered both. Literacy was illegal for enslaved people in South Carolina, punishable by whipping or sale. Samuel understood the risk and accepted it. Knowledge was the only property no one could auction. At 20, he married a woman named Ruth. She belonged to a different owner but lived close, enough that they could see each other Sundays after church. They had 2 children, a daughter, Grace, and a son, Thomas. Samuel kept their ages and heights written in his mind like account columns. Grace, 7 years, 4 feet 2 inches, gap-toothed smile. Thomas, 5 years, 3 feet 9 inches, left-handed, afraid of thunderstorms. The iron collar came in 1853. Samuel had been caught with a primer hidden in his jacket. The overseer, a thin-faced man named Virgil Kane, found it during a routine search and delivered it to Treadwell with obvious satisfaction. Kane hated Samuel for being too competent, too useful to whip casually. The book gave him leverage. Treadwell faced a choice. Selling Samuel would cost him an excellent warehouse manager. Ignoring the offense would encourage other enslaved people to break rules. The iron collar was compromise, punishment that advertised compliance without destroying value. The metal band locked around Samuel's neck with a small padlock, fitted snugly enough to chafe but not strangle. A 4-inch rod extended downward, forcing his chin up, making sleep difficult, reading impossible. 6 years, Treadwell announced. Then we'll discuss removing it if your conduct improves. 6 years in iron. Samuel learned to sleep sitting up, learned to work with his head tilted permanently upward, as if searching the sky for something that wasn't there. The collar became part of his body, its weight a constant reminder that he existed at the pleasure of men who considered themselves merciful. But the numbers kept working in his mind. 6 years, 43 people owned, 3 properties, 12 years of labor, 2 children, 1 wife. Arithmetic that would eventually balance. Ruth was sold in winter of 1854, 4 months after the collar went on. Her owner died intestate, and the estate needed quick liquidity. Samuel learned about it third hand from another enslaved man who'd overheard the transaction. She went to a rice plantation 90 miles south for $600. No negotiation, no warning, no goodbye. Grace and Thomas followed 6 months apart. Treadwell sold them to settle a gambling debt. He apologized to Samuel while signing the papers, explained it was business necessity, assured him the children would be treated well. Grace brought $450, Thomas $375. The mathematics of separation, $1,425 total. Roughly equivalent to 2 draft horses or 30 barrels of premium tobacco. Samuel's family, converted to profit and scattered across South Carolina like seeds thrown into different fields. After Thomas was gone, Samuel stopped speaking. Not entirely, he still responded to direct orders, still communicated what was necessary for work, but conversation died in him. The overseer noted it, shrugged, moved on. Silence made Samuel easier to manage anyway, but silence wasn't emptiness. Inside the quiet, Samuel was constructing something methodical and unforgiving. He began keeping mental records with the precision he'd once applied to shipping manifests. Names, dates, transactions, who bought, who sold, who profited. Every white man involved in his family's destruction got an entry in Samuel's private ledger. Marcus Treadwell, owner, sold Grace and Thomas. Debt, 2 children. Virgil Kane, overseer, caused collar, searched jacket, debt, 6 years. Edmund Pritchard, auctioneer, handled mother's sale, 1841, debt, 1 mother. Harrison Cale, rice planter, purchased Ruth, 1854, debt, 1 wife. The list grew. Lawyers who processed sales, judges who enforced fugitive laws, constables who hunted runaways, merchants who profited from slave-made goods. The whole intricate machinery of Charleston's economy, built on taking people from people and calling it civilization. 6 years in the collar. Samuel counted every day. In 1859, on September 7th, exactly 6 years to the day since the metal went on, Treadwell kept his word. He summoned Samuel to the main house, produced a key, unlocked the padlock. The collar came off with a metallic click that sounded like a door opening. Samuel touched his bare neck for the first time in 72 months. The skin beneath was scarred in a perfect ring, tissue damaged permanently from constant pressure. He would carry that mark until death. "You've been exemplary," Treadwell said. "Consider this a new beginning." Samuel nodded, silent as ever. That night, he filed through the chains in the warehouse storage room where Treadwell kept equipment for restraining cargo. It took 3 hours of patient work to weaken a link enough to snap. He walked out carrying nothing but the clothes he wore and a small knife stolen from the kitchen. Freedom, purchased with nothing. or so it appeared. Charleston Constable Report, September 8, 1859. Virgil Kane, overseer to Ems Treadwell, found deceased in bed. Physician cites heart failure, age 41, no signs of struggle. Samuel was 12 miles west of Charleston when Kane's body was discovered. He'd walked through the night, following old escape routes whispered among enslaved people who'd attempted the journey north. Most were caught and returned. Samuel had studied their failures like a tactician reviewing lost battles. The difference? He wasn't running. He was hunting. Kane had been easy. Samuel had simply waited in the overseer's cottage until the man returned from evening rounds, drunk as usual on confiscated rum. A hand over the mouth, pressure on the windpipe, methodical and quiet. Kane struggled for 90 seconds, then went limp. Samuel arranged him in bed, checked for a pulse to confirm death, and left through the window he'd entered. It looked like sleep, like mercy. But Kane's death was a test. Could Samuel kill? Could he do it cleanly, without emotion clouding execution? The answer was yes. 6 years of iron had burned away, whatever moral architecture might have hesitated. What remained was calculation. Debts owed, debts paid, accounts balanced. He returned to Charleston 3 nights later, entering the city through marsh paths that avoided main roads. The slave patrols were lazy, predictable. They watched official routes, but ignored the tidal channels where fishing boats moved in darkness. Samuel had memorized their patterns during 6 years of forced head tilting, his elevated chin giving him unobstructed views of guard rotations. His second target was Edmund Pritchard, the auctioneer who'd sold Samuel's mother 18 years prior. Pritchard lived in a modest townhouse near the auction yard, close enough to walk to work. He was 63, recently widowed, employing one elderly house servant who went deaf after sunset. Samuel entered through a ground floor window left open for ventilation. Pritchard was asleep in an upstairs bedroom, snoring with the abandon of someone who'd never feared nighttime visitors. Samuel stood over him, watching the rise and fall of breath, remembering his mother's face as she was led away to a stranger's wagon. He used the pillow. Pritchard woke briefly, eyes wide, but his strength at 63 was no match for Samuel's. The struggle lasted 40 seconds, then stillness, another natural death. An old man who'd simply stopped breathing in his sleep. 2 down. Samuel left the townhouse before dawn, melting back into the network of alleys and abandoned buildings where Charleston's invisible population lived. Enslaved people, free blacks, poor whites, criminals, anyone who existed in the gaps between official notice. He needed resources, money, documents, allies. But Charleston in 1859 operated on a system that made all 3 difficult for a black man without papers. Free blacks were required to carry certificates of freedom. Enslaved people needed passes signed by owners. Anyone caught without proper documentation faced immediate arrest and probable sale. Samuel had neither freedom papers nor a pass. Legally, he was stolen property, worth approximately $1,000 on the open market. Any constable could seize him. Any white person could demand his papers. Any slave patrol could shoot him on sight. But he had something more useful than papers: knowledge. 6 years watching Charleston's commercial machinery had taught him every crack in its foundation. He knew which merchants ran side businesses in forged documents, which constables took bribes, which warehouses stored goods that could be stolen and fenced, which white men kept black mistresses and paid generously for discretion. The city's economy ran on secrets. Samuel had collected them like currency. Within a week, He'd acquired forged free papers identifying him as Samuel Freeman, a carpenter from Virginia. The documents cost $30, stolen from Pritchard's house before the body cooled. The forger was a nervous white man named Silas who operated from a print shop near the docks. "These won't hold up to serious scrutiny," Silas warned, pocketing the money. "They'll hold long enough," Samuel replied. Charleston in autumn smelled different than summer. Cooler air carried the scent of turned earth from surrounding plantations, mixing with harbor salt and the perpetual smoke from rice mills. The city was preparing for winter social season, when wealthy planters would abandon their estates and crowd the townhouses for balls, theater, horse races. Samuel Freeman, as he was now known, found work with a man named Josiah Webb, a professional slave catcher who operated one of Charleston's most successful fugitive recovery businesses. Webb employed a mix of white trackers, free black informants, and dogs bred specifically for hunting humans. His operation was legal, profitable, and thoroughly respectable by Charleston standards. Getting hired required convincing Webb that a free black carpenter had useful skills for tracking runaways. "I know how enslaved people think," Samuel explained during his interview. "I know where they run, how they move, what mistakes they make." Webb studied him with cold blue eyes. "You weren't always free, were you?" "No, sir. Purchased my freedom in Virginia. Took 12 years. And now you want to catch the ones who run instead of buy themselves out?" "I want to eat, sir. This pays better than carpentry." Webb laughed. "Honest, at least. You're hired. $10 per capture plus expenses. You follow my rules, you keep your papers current, and you don't ask questions about what happens to the ones we catch." Samuel nodded. The irony was perfect. He would hunt runaways while hunting the men who'd destroyed his family. The slave catcher work would provide cover, income, and access to Charleston's network of human traffickers. Most importantly, it would teach him exactly how the machinery worked. His first assignment came within days. A young woman named Alice had fled a Beaufort plantation, likely heading toward Charleston's free black community. Webb gave Samuel her description, last known location, and a $30 reward for recovery. "Bring her back alive and unharmed," Webb instructed. "Damaged goods bring lower fees." Samuel tracked Alice to a boarding house in Charleston's Neck District, where free blacks and poor whites lived in uneasy proximity. She'd been hiding in the attic of a seamstress who sympathized with runaways. The seamstress, a free woman of color named Margaret, tried to refuse Samuel entry. "She's not here," Margaret insisted, blocking the door. "I can get constables," Samuel said quietly. "Then they'll search your whole house, arrest everyone inside, check everyone's papers. Or you can let me talk to her alone." Margaret's face hardened, but she stepped aside. Samuel found Alice in the attic, 16 years old, terrified. She'd run because her owner's son had been forcing himself on her nightly. She had marks on her wrists from being tied down. "Are you taking me back?" she whispered. Samuel looked at her for a long moment. He thought of Grace, who would be almost Alice's age now. He thought of the system that made young women into property that could be used however owners desired. Then he made a choice that would define everything that followed. "No," he said, "but we need to make it look like I tried." He gave Alice $20, his own money, and detailed instructions for reaching a Quaker safe house 40 miles north. He told Margaret to hide her for 3 more days, then help her move. He returned to Webb and reported that Alice had fled Charleston before he arrived, probably aboard a northbound ship. Webb accepted the story with a shrug. "Happens. Some get away. We'll collect the search fee anyway." Samuel had passed his first test. He could work within the system without becoming it. He could balance the ledger in his mind while keeping Webb ignorant of his true purpose. Over the following months, Samuel became one of Webb's most reliable trackers. He caught 7 runaways and successfully helped 9 others escape, always careful to maintain a plausible failure rate. The money was good, but more importantly, the work gave him comprehensive knowledge of Charleston's slave economy. He learned which plantations treated people worst, driving them to desperate flight, which ship captains could be bribed to carry fugitives, which constables were lazy, which were zealous, which were corrupt. He memorized patrol schedules, safe house locations, the names of every lawyer, judge, and merchant involved in human trafficking, and he continued his private work. The third name on his list was Harrison Cale, the rice planter who'd purchased Ruth. Cale lived part-time in Charleston, part-time at his plantation. Samuel watched his routines for 6 weeks before acting. Cale's death was ruled an accident. He fell down his townhouse stairs at night, breaking his neck. The physician noted he'd been drinking heavily, consistent with his reputation. The constabulary filed it as misadventure. Only Samuel knew that Cale had been pushed, 3 debts paid, 11 remaining on the broadsheet he'd pinned beneath that iron collar on the courthouse steps. First Methodist Church stood at the corner of Meeting and Cumberland, its white steeple visible from most of Charleston's peninsula. The congregation was exclusively white, exclusively wealthy, exclusively certain that God sanctioned their economic system. They sang hymns about freedom while owning people. They prayed for mercy while showing none. Reverend Thomas Ashford had preached there for 14 years. He was a thoughtful man, educated at Yale, genuinely troubled by slavery's moral dimensions. He'd written several sermons arguing for better treatment of enslaved people, advocating Christian kindness within the system rather than challenging the system itself. He'd also officiated at the auction of Samuel's children. Not directly. Ashford didn't work auction houses, but he'd blessed the transaction. Treadwell had asked him to pray over the sale, to sanctify it as God's will. Ashford had complied, standing in the warehouse while Grace and Thomas were led away, asking divine providence to guide them to good Christian homes. Samuel had been there, wearing his collar, forced to watch. He'd listened to Ashford's prayer, thanking God for the natural order of things, the wisdom of hierarchy, the blessing of Southern civilization. That memory returned each time Samuel passed First Methodist. But killing a prominent minister would draw scrutiny his previous targets hadn't. Ashford was too visible, too connected. His death couldn't look natural without extensive preparation. Samuel needed a different approach. He began attending Ashford's sermons, sitting in the segregated balcony where free blacks and trusted house servants were permitted. He listened to the Reverend's careful theology, the way he acknowledged slavery's difficulties while defending its necessity. Ashford was performing a high-wire act, maintaining his congregation's support while preserving his self-image as a moral man. After one service, Samuel approached him during the informal gathering on the church steps. "Reverend, might I ask a theological question?" Ashford turned, smiling with the practiced warmth of a shepherd greeting his flock. "Of course, my son. What troubles you?" "Scripture says we should forgive our enemies. But what if our enemies don't believe they've done wrong? Can forgiveness exist without acknowledgement?" The question made Ashford pause. His smile flickered, then steadied. "An excellent question. Forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves, not something dependent on others' recognition. Christ forgave from the cross without waiting for confession. But Christ was God. Samuel replied quietly. We're men. We need truth before we can forgive. Truth is complicated, my son. Sometimes we must trust in divine justice rather than earthly accounting. Even when earthly accounting involves children sold from their father? Ashford's face went still. He studied Samuel more carefully now, seeing past the deferential posture to something harder underneath. Do I know you? You blessed the sale of my children 6 years ago. Warehouse transaction. You prayed for God's providence. The silence stretched. People flowed past them on the steps, oblivious to the confrontation unfolding in polite tones. I officiate many such occasions, Ashford said finally. I don't recall specifically. Grace and Thomas, 7 and 5 years old. I was wearing an iron collar and couldn't bow my head during your prayer. Ashford's throat worked. I pray for all children, regardless of circumstance. Do you pray for their fathers too? The ones who watched them taken? What do you want from me? Samuel leaned closer, voice dropping. I want you to remember. I want you to understand that your prayers didn't ease anything. They sanctified theft. They put God's name on breaking families. I don't make the system, Ashford whispered. I only minister within it. That's the same thing, Reverend. Samuel walked away, leaving Ashford pale and shaken on the steps. He didn't kill him that day, or the next week, or the week after. Instead, he let the minister live with knowledge. Let him see Samuel at services, a quiet presence in the balcony. Let him wonder when the accounting would come due. Psychological debt, accumulating interest. Sometimes the cruelest mercy was letting men realize what they'd done. Charleston County Courthouse held records dating back to the city's founding. Deeds, wills, contracts, bills of sale. The entire legal infrastructure of slavery preserved in bound ledgers stacked in a basement archive. Public records, theoretically available to anyone. In practice, the archive was overseen by a clerk named Albert Rourke, who strictly limited access. Free blacks weren't permitted entry without written authorization from a white sponsor. Enslaved people, regardless of literacy, were barred entirely. Samuel needed those records. His mental ledger contained names and dates, but legal documentation would reveal networks. Who bought from whom, which families intermarried, which businesses shared ownership of enslaved people. The paper trail would show him not just individual villains, but the system's complete structure. Getting access required leverage. Rourke had a weakness. His daughter, Catherine, who'd fallen in love with a clerk from a rival law firm. The relationship was secret because Catherine's father had different marital plans for her, involving a judge's son with better prospects. Catherine and her clerk met clandestinely at a boarding house near the docks. Samuel learned this from one of Webb's informants, a free black woman who cleaned rooms at the boarding house. Information, traded carefully, built networks outside official channels. He approached Rourke with a simple proposition. I need archive access for carpentry research, Samuel explained, presenting his forged free papers. I'm reconstructing property boundaries for a building project. 2 hours, once a week, for a month. Denied, Rourke said without looking up from his desk. You need a white sponsor's letter. Even if I know something about your daughter's afternoon activities? Rourke's head snapped up. What did you say? The boarding house on South Battery, Thursday afternoons. Her gentleman friend from Morton and Associates. Shall I continue? The clerk's face went white, then red. You're threatening me? I'm proposing a trade. My silence for your cooperation. No one gets hurt. You protect your daughter's reputation, I get my research time. Rourke's hands trembled with rage and fear, but calculation won. A scandal involving Catherine would destroy her marriage prospects and embarrass the family. Giving a free black man limited archive, access was irregular, but not illegal. 2 hours weekly, Rourke said through gritted teeth. You touch nothing but the property records. You make no copies. You tell no one about this arrangement. Agreed. Samuel spent the next 4 weeks mapping Charleston's slave economy through legal documents. Bills of sale revealed purchase chains. Who'd bought Samuel's mother in 1841? Who'd owned her before that? Which merchant had profited from each transaction? Wills showed how enslaved people were bequeathed like furniture, divided among heirs used to settle debts. The records confirmed what Samuel suspected. His family's destruction hadn't been exceptional cruelty. It was routine business. Grace and Thomas had been sold to clear Treadwell's gambling losses. Ruth Sale had settled her deceased owner's estate. Samuel's mother had been auctioned when her previous owner upgraded to younger workers. Everywhere he looked, the documents revealed ordinary people conducting ordinary commerce in human beings. No villains in the conventional sense, just merchants and lawyers and judges facilitating a system they inherited and profited from. The banality made it worse somehow. Samuel copied nothing. He'd promised Rourke, but his memory held everything. Names, dates, amounts. By the time his month ended, he'd reconstructed the complete network that had destroyed his family. 42 people bore direct responsibility. 14 remained in Charleston. His list grew more specific. Margaret, the seamstress who'd hidden Alice, became Samuel's reluctant ally. She operated a dress shop that catered to Charleston's free black community and sympathetic whites. Her establishment served as informal refuge for people moving through the Underground Railroad's southern routes. You're playing a dangerous game, she told Samuel over coffee in her workroom. Working for Webb while helping runaways. Hunting the men who hurt you while pretending to be a carpenter. Eventually, someone notices. Eventually, I'll be finished, Samuel replied. Finished or dead? Same thing, probably. Margaret set down her cup. I helped Alice because she was a child running from rape. I'll help you because you let her go. But I won't help you kill Samuel. There's a line. Where's the line between helping me hunt and helping me kill? You give me information. You give me shelter. You don't ask too many questions. You're already complicit. The word hung between them like smoke. I'm protecting people, Margaret said. So am I. Different people, different methods. Are you? Or are you just feeding your anger? Samuel stood, walked to the window overlooking the street. Outside, Charleston continued its daily business. Merchants called prices. Carriages rattled past. Enslaved workers loaded wagons, swept storefronts, carried packages for white customers. My daughter would be 14 now, he said quietly. My son, 12. I don't know if they're alive. I don't know if they remember me. Every day I wake up and the first thing I think is, they're gone because the system took them. Good people, bad people, doesn't matter. The system runs on taking. So you take back? I balance accounts. Margaret sighed. What happens when you've killed everyone on your list? When all the debts are paid? Will Grace and Thomas be any less gone? No, but the men who took them will be. And that's enough? It has to be. She studied him for a long moment. I'll keep helping. But not because I agree. Because refusing would make me complicit in a different way. Because sometimes we only get bad choices and have to pick the least worst. That's all any of us do, Samuel said. The conversation ended there, but it planted something in Samuel's mind. A question he'd been avoiding. What happened after the list was finished? If he survived the killing, if he avoided capture, if every name was crossed off, what then? He had no answer. Revenge was the only future he'd constructed. Beyond it lay only emptiness. November brought cooler weather and increased patrol activity. 2 more bodies had been found. Augustus Brack, a lawyer who'd processed Ruth's sale, dead from apparent poisoning. Henry Collum, a warehouse owner who'd stored enslaved people awaiting transport, discovered in the Savannah River, ruled accidental drowning. 5 deaths in 2 months, all men connected to Charleston's slave trade. The constabulary began noticing patterns. Chief Constable William Desmond posted notices offering rewards for information about suspicious deaths. He increased patrols, ordered investigations of known abolitionists, and quietly asked Webb's operation to watch for anything unusual among the free black population. "They're seeing ghosts," Webb told Samuel during a briefing, "thinking every slave trader's death is conspiracy. But these are dangerous businesses. Men die. Heart failure, accidents, crime, it happens." Samuel nodded, careful to show only professional interest. But Webb's next words struck harder. "Still, Desmond wants us watching, particularly free blacks with incomplete documentation. Anyone whose papers don't quite match their story." Samuel's forged documents had served him well, but they wouldn't survive serious scrutiny. The dates were slightly wrong, the signatures good but not perfect. Under pressure, they'd collapse. He needed to move faster. The 6th name was Theodore Marsh, a banker who'd financed multiple slave purchases, including Grace and Thomas. Marsh lived in a mansion on South Battery with round-the-clock servants and a family that kept respectable hours. Getting to him would require planning. Samuel spent 3 weeks studying the household. He learned that Marsh walked alone to his office each morning at 7:30, a 4-block journey through quiet streets. Consistent routine, minimal witnesses, good escape routes. On December 3rd, 1859, Samuel waited in an alley along Marsh's route. The banker appeared precisely on schedule, walking with a cane he used more for fashion than support. Samuel stepped out as Marsh passed. "Mr. Marsh, might I borrow a moment?" Marsh turned, saw a well-dressed black man, immediately looked for papers. "Do I know you?" "No, sir, but you knew my children. Grace and Thomas, sold to clear Marcus Treadwell's debt. You financed the transaction." Marsh's face showed brief confusion, then dismissal. "I financed dozens of transactions monthly. I don't recall specifics." They were 7 and 5 years old, worth $825 combined. You collected 4% interest on the loan. "If you have a complaint, take it to—" Samuel's knife was out and at Marsh's throat before the banker could finish. They were still in the alley's shadows, invisible from the street. "I'm not complaining," Samuel said quietly. "I'm collecting." "Please," Marsh whispered. "I have money. I can pay you. You already paid $33 in interest off my children. That's what their separation was worth to you. I didn't make the system. I just work within it." The same words Reverend Ashford had used. The same justification every participant offered. No one made the system. Everyone just worked within it. And somehow 2 million people stayed enslaved. "Here's what you're going to do," Samuel said. "You're going to write a confession. Every slave purchase you financed, every loan you made for human beings. You're going to leave it with your lawyer in a sealed envelope. marked to be opened if you die unexpectedly. Then you're going to live with that weight. Or I finish what I started right now. Marsh's bladder released. The smell of urine filled the alley. I'll write it, he gasped. Whatever you want. Samuel held the knife steady for 5 more seconds, then stepped back. You have 1 week. If the confession isn't filed, I come back. He walked away, leaving Marsh trembling against the alley wall. It was the first time he'd let someone live. The first time he'd chosen psychological torture over death. Perhaps Margaret's questions were affecting him. Perhaps he was discovering that some debts could be paid without bloodshed. Or perhaps he was just extending the suffering. Theodore Marsh didn't file a confession. He went directly to Chief Constable Desmond and reported the assault. Samuel learned about it from Webb, who'd been called to consult on the investigation. Marsh claims a free black carpenter named Samuel Freeman threatened him at knife point, demanded a written confession about slave trading, described you perfectly, right down to the scar around your neck. Samuel's mind raced. Marsh had noticed the collar scar despite high collars designed to hide it, or someone had told him to look for it. Either way, the description would lead to Samuel Freeman's forged papers, and from there to questions those papers couldn't answer. What did you tell Desmond? Samuel asked carefully. That I'd never heard you express abolitionist sympathies, that you've been a reliable tracker, that Marsh might be confused. Webb paused. But I also told him I'd keep an eye on you, because something's been off lately, and I'm starting to see it. The vice was tightening. Samuel had 48 hours, maybe less, before constables came looking. He could run, disappear into the Underground Railroad network, head north. But running meant leaving his list unfinished. 7 names remained, 7 debts unpaid. The choice wasn't difficult. He accelerated his timeline. That night, he went to Marcus Treadwell's house. 6 years had passed since the collar came off, but Treadwell still lived in the same mansion, still owned the same warehouses, still considered himself a moderate Christian businessman who'd shown mercy to an educated slave. Samuel entered through the kitchen, past servants who'd been trained not to see or hear inconvenient things. He found Treadwell in his study, reviewing ledgers. The man looked older, grayer, but fundamentally unchanged. Hello, Marcus. Treadwell looked up, saw Samuel, and his face went through rapid calculations. Recognition, confusion, fear. Samuel, you ran off 6 years ago. I thought you'd gone north. I stayed close. Had business to finish. What are you? Grace and Thomas. You sold them to pay gambling debts. $825 total. You apologized while signing the papers. Treadwell stood slowly, hands raised. That was years ago. I had no choice. The creditors? You had every choice. You could have sold land, equipment, anything that wasn't human. But children brought better prices. Samuel, I understand you're angry, but do you know where they are? Did you ever check what happened to them? Treadwell's silence was answer enough. Samuel pulled out his knife. I could kill you now, make it look like robbery, but that wouldn't be balanced. You took years from me. I should take years from you. What do you want? I want you to write every transaction, every person you bought and sold, where they went, who purchased them. I want the names of everyone involved in taking my family, and I want you to sign it. They'll arrest me, charge me with what? Following legal commerce? They'll know what you are, what we all know you are, but pretend not to see. Treadwell's face hardened. You think this makes you righteous? You're working for Webb, hunting runaways. You've become what you claim to hate. The words landed like fists. Because Treadwell was right. Samuel had spent months using the slave-catching system to fund his revenge. He'd let some escape and caught others. He'd made calculations identical to the ones he condemned. "I know what I am," Samuel said. "Do you?" Before Treadwell could answer, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Heavy boots, multiple men, constables. Webb had betrayed him faster than expected. Samuel was arrested without struggle. He let them take the knife, bind his hands, march him through Charleston's streets to the city jail. Fighting would have meant death. Surrender meant a chance, however slim. The jail was a 2-story brick building near the courthouse, divided into cells for whites, free blacks, and enslaved prisoners awaiting sale or punishment. Samuel was placed in the free black section, a damp room with 6 other men awaiting trial or transfer. Chief Constable Desmond interviewed him the following morning. "Your papers say Samuel Freeman, carpenter from Virginia, but Marcus Treadwell identifies you as Samuel, his former property who fled 6 years ago. Which is true?" "Both," Samuel said. "I was Samuel. I became Samuel Freeman. I claimed my freedom." "Claimed or stole?" "Freedom can't be stolen, only recognized or denied." Desmond leaned back, studying him. "You're educated, more than most free blacks I've met. Where'd you learn to talk like that?" "Reading ledgers in Treadwell's warehouse. Shipping manifests teach grammar." "And killing? Where'd you learn that?" "I don't know what you mean." 5 men dead in 2 months, all connected to slave trading, all natural causes until you start connecting them. Then it looks like systematic elimination. Men die every day in Charleston, Constable. Heart failure, drowning, accidents. Unless you have evidence I caused specific deaths. Desmond smiled without warmth. "Here's how this works. You're either a free man falsely accused, in which case I need to release you, or you're escaped property, in which case I return you to Treadwell, or you're a murderer, in which case you hang. I'm still deciding which. What does the law say? Law says you're property until proven otherwise. Burden of proof is on you." There it was, the system's fundamental architecture. Samuel wasn't innocent until proven guilty. He was property until proven free, and his forged papers wouldn't survive legal scrutiny. But Desmond was hesitating. Because if Samuel was a murderer, arresting him would require trials, evidence, testimony. The constable would have to prove connections between deaths and prove Samuel's presence at each scene. Difficult with natural causes and no witnesses. Easier to return him to Treadwell as escaped property and let the matter die quietly. "I'll give you one option," Desmond said. "Confess you're Treadwell's escaped property. Return to his custody. This ends. Otherwise, I dig deeper, and we see where the bodies lead." Samuel considered. Returning to Treadwell meant re-enslavement, probably sale to a harsher master far from Charleston. But it meant staying alive, maintaining the possibility, however remote, of escape. "I need to think." "You have until tomorrow morning." That night, Samuel heard whispers from other cells. One voice, barely audible. "North wall, loose brick, 3 feet up." He felt along the wall in darkness, found the brick, worked it free over 2 hours of patient effort. Behind it, a small cavity containing tools left by previous inmates, a thin metal file, a coil of rope, matches. The Underground Railroad ran through the jail itself. Samuel spent the night filing through his cell's window bars. By dawn, he had one bar weakened enough to bend. At 4 in the morning, when guards changed shifts and attention wavered, He squeezed through the gap, dropped 12 feet to the street, and disappeared into Charleston's pre-dawn darkness. Escaped prisoner now, not just escaped property. The vice had tightened again, but he was still free, still moving, still hunting. Margaret's dress shop was closed when Samuel arrived, but she let him in through the back entrance. She didn't ask questions, just handed him coffee and fresh clothes. "They'll be searching everywhere," she said. "Every safe house, every known sympathizer. You can stay one night, no more. I need to finish the list. Samuel, you need to run. North, fast. The Underground Railroad can move you to Philadelphia in 2 weeks. 7 names left." Margaret grabbed his shoulders. "Listen to yourself. You're choosing revenge over survival. Grace and Thomas need their father alive more than they need you dead with empty victories. They don't need me. They don't even remember me. You don't know that. I know they were 7 and 5 when they were sold. I know children that age forget. I know I'm just a scar in their memory, if that." Margaret released him, exhausted. Then what is this for? If not for them, why keep killing? Samuel had no good answer. The question he'd been avoiding circled back. What happened after the list ended? If revenge wasn't for his children, if it wouldn't restore what was taken, what was it except rage given purpose? But rage was all he had left. "I need information," he said finally. 4 more names are in Charleston. Tell me where." Margaret sighed, then pulled out a ledger where she tracked sympathizers, contacts, people who moved through her network. She flipped through pages, stopped at entries marked with small symbols Samuel didn't recognize. "These codes," she said, pointing. "They mark slave traders who've died in the past year. I keep track because deaths create opportunities. Estates sell people. Families restructure. Sometimes we can help people slip away during the chaos." She showed him 7 marks. 5 matched his list exactly. 2 were names he hadn't known about. "You've been more efficient than I realized," Margaret said quietly. "Who made these marks? You?" "No. Someone's been feeding me information. Anonymous notes left at the shop. Details about traders' deaths, upcoming estate sales, opportunities for helping people escape. I thought I had a benefactor in the system. Now I'm thinking I had you. It wasn't me." They stared at each other. If Samuel hadn't been leaving notes and Margaret hadn't been making marks, someone else was tracking the same deaths for the same reason. Someone else was hunting. "There's another list," Samuel said slowly. "Another hunter. Someone who knows what I know and wants the same men dead. That doesn't narrow it much. Half of Charleston's enslaved population has reason to want these men gone. But it did narrow it, because whoever was leaving notes for Margaret had access to information, resources, literacy. That eliminated most enslaved people and many free blacks. It suggested someone operating inside the system with enough privilege to move freely. Someone like Samuel himself. Over the next 3 days, hiding in Margaret's attic, Samuel pieced together a pattern. The mysterious informant had been active for 6 months, always knowing which traders were vulnerable, which estates were in transition, which deaths would cause minimal investigation. The notes showed sophisticated understanding of Charleston's legal and commercial systems. Samuel had one suspect, Reverend Ashford, the minister he'd confronted, the man who'd blessed his children's sale, the one Samuel had let live with guilt rather than kill. Ashford had the education, the access, the insider knowledge, and more importantly, he had motive. Guilt was a powerful force. On the 4th night, Samuel slipped out of Margaret's shop, and made his way to First Methodist Church. The building was dark, but light showed in Ashford's private study. Samuel climbed through an unlocked window and found the Reverend at his desk, writing. "I've been expecting you," Ashford said without looking up. "You've been helping me." "I've been trying to help myself, failing mostly." Ashford turned. His face had aged badly in the months since their confrontation. New lines, hollow eyes, the look of a man who'd stopped sleeping well. "The notes to Margaret?" "Yes. After our conversation, I couldn't stop seeing it. Every sermon I preached, every blessing I gave, all of it sanctifying theft. So I started documenting, recording deaths, estate sales, anything that might help people escape during chaos. Why not just speak out, condemn the system, and lose my position, my congregation, my life's work?" Ashford laughed bitterly. "I'm a coward, Samuel. I help from shadows because I can't face the light. But I've been tracking the deaths too. I know what you're doing. And I want to help you finish." Ashford's study smelled of old books and candle wax. Maps of Charleston covered one wall, marked with symbols Samuel now recognized from Margaret's ledger. The Reverend had been constructing his own network, his own plan. "7 names remain on your list," Ashford said, spreading papers across his desk. 4 in Charleston, 3 on plantations within 50 miles. I can get you to all of them, but afterward you run. You take the railroad north, and you don't come back. Why help me at all? Because I blessed evil for 14 years. Because I stood in warehouses and called slavery God's will while children cried. Because I'm too weak to fight the system openly but strong enough to help someone who will. Samuel studied the Reverend's face. Guilt was powerful, but it was also slippery. Men used guilt to perform small penances while avoiding large changes. "What's the cost?" Samuel asked. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing, or everything. I want you to understand that I know what I did, that I carry it, that I'll carry it until I die. That's not enough. I know it isn't, but it's all I have." Samuel considered. The partnership was morally complicated, using the minister's guilt to fuel revenge, but it was also practical. Ashford could provide information, access, cover, things that would make the final 7 deaths cleaner, faster, safer, and Samuel was running out of time. "Tell me about the 4 in Charleston." Ashford pulled out detailed files. "Robert Chenault, cotton broker who processed your mother's sale in 1841. Lives on Trad Street, single, employs minimal staff. Vulnerability, walks to his warehouse at dawn. Routine never varies. Next. Simon Draper, auctioneer who handled Grace and Thomas. Semi-retired now, but still consults on major sales. Vulnerability, heavy drinker, frequents taverns in the evenings, often walks home alone. Next. James Portman, lawyer who drafted transfer documents for Ruth's sale. Office near the courthouse. Works late most nights. Vulnerability, keeps expensive brandy in his desk. Drinks while reviewing cases. And the 4th? Ashford hesitated. Josiah Webb. Samuel went still. His employer, the man who'd hired him as a tracker, who'd taught him the slave-catching business from inside. "Webb handled your mother's transport in 1841, worked for the trader who purchased her, made sure she reached the plantation alive. He's been in this business for 23 years, Samuel. He's killed runaways, broken families, profited from every kind of human misery. And he trusts you." The irony was complete. Samuel had been working for one of the men on his list without knowing it. Learning from him, taking his money, using his resources to hunt the others. "How long have you known?" "Since you started working for him." I recognized Webb's name in my research, matched it to your mother's transport records. I've been waiting to see if you'd discover it yourself. Samuel thought of Webb's lessons, his casual conversations about the business of hunting people. The man had never seemed cruel exactly, just professional. He did his job efficiently, collected his fees, went home to a quiet house in the evenings, just working within the system. "I'll need your help with Webb," Samuel said finally. "The others I can handle alone. But Webb is careful. He'll spot an attack coming." "I have a plan for that too. But Samuel, after Webb, you're done. You take the railroad north and you disappear. Because by then, every constable in Charleston will be hunting you." Agreed. They spent the next hour reviewing details. Ashford had done thorough work, documenting routines, vulnerabilities, escape routes. He'd been preparing for this conversation, building a roadmap for Samuel's final killings. As Samuel prepared to leave, Ashford asked, "What will you do after? If you survive? If you make it north? What then?" "Find my children. And if you can't? Then I'll have paid the debts I could pay. That's all any of us do." Ashford nodded slowly. "I used to believe God kept accounts, balanced them in the end. Now I think we're alone with our choices and their consequences. I think we make our own justice or we make none at all." "You're losing your faith, Reverend. I lost it months ago. I'm just admitting it now." Samuel left through the window, dropping into Charleston's darkness. Behind him, Ashford stood in candlelight, a man who'd broken his God while trying to save his conscience. But broken things could still be useful. Robert Cheneau died on December 20th, 1859. Heart seizure during his dawn walk, witnessed by a merchant opening his shop. Natural causes, quickly ruled. The second mark. Simon Draper followed on December 23rd, fell from a second-story tavern window while drunk, broke his neck in the cobblestone alley below. Accidental death, consistent with his habits. The third mark. James Portman lasted until December 27th. Poisoned by tainted brandy, his body found slumped over legal documents in his office. Investigation revealed he'd been drinking heavily, likely consumed bad spirits. Unfortunate, but not suspicious. The fourth mark. 3 deaths in 8 days. Constables noticed but couldn't connect them beyond coincidence. Charleston's elite traders were aging men who lived dangerous lives. Sometimes clusters happened. Josiah Webb was different. Webb had been suspecting since Marsh's accusation. He'd increased security at his home, varied his routines, carried a pistol. He was watching for Samuel even while pretending trust remained. Ashford's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Use Webb's profession against him. On January 2nd, 1860, Ashford visited Webb's office with a proposal. A wealthy planter in Beaufort had 3 enslaved workers planning escape. The planter wanted them captured quietly, returned without fuss, no legal complications, standard work for Webb's operation. "I'll send my best man," Webb said. "Samuel Freeman." "I was hoping you'd come personally," Ashford replied. "The planter specifically requested discretion. He knows your reputation." Webb's vanity won. He agreed to handle it himself, departing Charleston on January 3rd. The journey would take him through isolated swamp roads where accidents happened. Samuel was waiting at a narrow bridge 15 miles south of Charleston. He'd chosen the location carefully. Deep water below, no witnesses, thick vegetation for cover. Webb's horse appeared at dusk. The slave catcher rode alert but confident, pistol in reach, eyes scanning the road ahead. He didn't see Samuel in the trees above until too late. The rope caught Webb across the chest, swept him from his saddle. He hit the ground hard, pistol flying. Samuel dropped from the branch, landing beside him. Samuel. Webb coughed blood. Should have known. You transported my mother in 1841, Natchez to Charleston. You remember? I transported hundreds. Can't recall specifics. She was 36 years old, separated from her 8-year-old son. You made sure she arrived alive for auction, professional work. Webb's eyes focused. That's what this is about? Business from 19 years ago? It's about every person you've hunted, every family you've broken, every dollar you've made from human suffering. I didn't make the system, boy. I just work within it. I know. Everyone just works within it. Nobody builds it, nobody maintains it. It just exists and you all profit. Webb tried to rise. Samuel's knife was already at his throat. I taught you well, Webb said. You learned everything I know about hunting people. Now you're using it against us. Against you. I'm using it against you. Same thing. You kill me, you're still a hunter. Still using the system's tools. Still part of the machinery. The words echoed Treadwell's accusation. The same poisonous truth Samuel had been avoiding. He'd become what he hated. Used the system against itself. Turned slavery's methods into weapons of revenge. But revenge was all he had. The difference, Samuel said quietly, is I know what I am. He pushed the knife. Webb died quickly, professionally, the way he'd lived. Samuel dragged the body to the bridge edge, rolled it into the black water below. Current would carry it downstream, deposit it miles away. Another accident on dangerous roads. The 5th mark. Samuel stood alone on the bridge as night fell completely. 7 debts paid. 7 men dead. The list was finished except for 3 plantation targets Ashford had identified outside Charleston. But something had changed. The mechanical efficiency that had driven him through 5 killings was fracturing. Webb's final words circled in his mind. You're still a hunter. Still part of the machinery. He'd paid debts in blood while using blood's economy. He'd fought the system by becoming its perfect weapon. The mathematics didn't balance the way he'd thought they would. Below the bridge, dark water flowed toward the ocean, carrying Webb's body and Samuel's certainty that any of this mattered. Samuel never killed the final 3. Ashford helped him disappear into the Underground Railroad on January 5, 1860, 2 days after Webb's death. The choice wasn't moral redemption or sudden conscience. It was mathematics of a different kind. 10 men dead, 7 from his original list, 3 more encountered along the way, and Grace and Thomas were still gone. Ruth was still lost. His mother had been dead for years, fever claimed on a plantation whose name Samuel never learned. No amount of killing would restore what was taken. Webb had been right about that much. The system continued regardless of how many individuals Samuel removed. New traders replaced dead ones. New auctioneers stepped up. New ministers blessed new sales. He could kill forever and change nothing. Margaret arranged his transport. The railroad moved him through safe houses in South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. Quaker families fed him, hid him in barns and cellars, passed him north like cargo moving against the South's commercial flow. In Philadelphia, he found work as a carpenter using skills half learned and half invented. He kept the name Samuel Freeman, let the forged papers become real through time and distance. Charleston's constables searched for him briefly, then filed the case as another escaped slave who'd vanished north. Marcus Treadwell died in 1862 without ever knowing what became of his former property. Samuel never stopped looking for his family. He visited every freedmen's settlement, every refugee community, asking about a woman named Ruth, children named Grace and Thomas. He placed advertisements in abolitionist newspapers, sent letters to missionaries working in the South, followed every rumor and ghost story. In 1867, 7 years after escaping Charleston, he found Grace. She was living in Washington, working as a teacher in a school for freed children. 21 years old, poised and educated, with no memory of a father who'd worn an iron collar. She'd been sold 4 times after Treadwell's initial transaction, carried as far west as Louisiana before the war freed her. She'd built a new life from nothing, and the man claiming to be her father was just another story from a past she'd worked hard to escape. "I don't remember you," she said when Samuel finally convinced her to meet. "I remember being sold. I remember different plantations. I remember being free after the war, but I don't remember a father." Samuel showed her the scar around his neck, described her mother, recalled details only her father could know. Grace listened politely, then asked, "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just wanted to know you survived." "I did, without you." The truth landed harder than any of Webb's accusations. Grace had survived, built a life, become someone admirable and whole. His absence had shaped her, but his presence wouldn't repair anything. The fantasy of reunion he'd carried through 10 murders dissolved in her careful distance. "I understand," Samuel said. "I won't intrude further." "Did you kill people?" Grace asked suddenly. "Looking for me?" Samuel hesitated. "Yes." "How many?" 10. Men who helped break our family. I thought it was justice." Grace studied him with eyes that had seen too much. "It wasn't justice. It was pain dressed as purpose. But I understand that too." They never developed a relationship. Grace allowed occasional letters, brief visits every few years, but maintained distance. She married a teacher named William Hayes, had 3 children, lived a good life. Samuel remained a footnote, the violent father she acknowledged but didn't embrace. Thomas, he never found. The trail went cold in Alabama, stories contradicting, records lost. Samuel searched until 1875, then accepted that some absences were permanent. Samuel Freeman died in Philadelphia on March 2, 1883, at age 63. Pneumonia, common among the elderly. His funeral was small, attended by fellow carpenters and members of his church. Grace came from Washington with her eldest son, a solemn boy of 12 who looked like his grandfather without knowing it. Among Samuel's possessions, they found a locked box containing newspaper clippings about unsolved deaths in Charleston between 1859 and 1860. 10 articles, carefully preserved. No notes, no confession, just documentation of events whose meaning died with him. Grace burned the clippings without reading them. But stories persisted in Charleston's black community about the hunter who'd turned the tools of oppression back on their wielders. Some said he'd killed 20 men before escaping north. Others claimed he'd built a network of assassins who continued his work. A few whispered that he'd never left, that he still moved through Charleston's shadows, balancing accounts that the law refused to address. None of it was true, but truth mattered less than meaning. The story of Samuel the Hunter became teaching, warning, and fantasy depending on who told it. Evidence that resistance was possible, that the powerful weren't untouchable, that debts accumulated and sometimes came due. Even now, when old families in Charleston discuss their histories, gaps appear in certain genealogies. Men who disappeared between 1859 and 1860, Their deaths recorded as natural, but their fates whispered about in ways official records never captured. And descendants of enslaved people sometimes mention an ancestor who knew the hunter, who helped him or hid him or pointed him toward justice that the law wouldn't provide. The iron collar Samuel wore for 6 years was never found. Some say he kept it as reminder. Some say he threw it in Charleston harbor the night he escaped. Some say it's still out there somewhere, buried in attic boxes or historical societies, waiting for someone to recognize the significance of filed metal and blood-marked leather. A piece of evidence that won't convict because all the guilty are dead, but might finally tell the truth. Subscribe if you want the next deep dive.